I never meant to stop at her door that evening. I should have kept walking, keys in my hand, mind on something ordinary. But there was something about the quiet glow from her window, soft, amber light spilling into the hallway, that made my steps slow, then halt. She opened the door before I could even knock, as if she'd been waiting. "Lost?" she asked, tilting her head, a faint smile touching her mouth. Her voice carried that calm gravity of someone who had lived more, seen more. It wasn't unkind, but it made me feel suddenly younger, too aware of myself. She was in her mid-40s, though I had stopped thinking of her in terms of age weeks ago. What I noticed instead was the way she filled space, deliberate, graceful, like nothing around her could rush her. I shook my head, maybe too quickly. "No. I didn't finish." Her eyes lingered on me, searching in a way that made it impossible to pretend. I shifted, hand brushing against the doorframe. My knuckles grazed the wood, and when her fingers came to rest against it too, not quite touching mine, the air between us felt like it thickened. The hallway was too quiet. Even the hum of the overhead bulb seemed to fade. I should have spoken, said something clever or casual, but all I managed was, "Your light was on." It sounded absurd. Yet she didn't laugh. She only leaned slightly against the door, one arm crossed over her chest, the other trailing down, fingertips grazing the curve of the frame near where mine rested. Not touching, not yet, but near enough that my skin tingled with the suggestion of it. "And that drew you here?" she asked softly. Her perfume was faint, not the kind that announced itself, but the kind you only caught when you were standing too close, warm, subtle, with something like sandalwood clinging to it. It made me want to lean in further, just to breathe it again. "I don't know," I admitted. And it was true. The corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile, more like a private thought slipping through. Her eyes lingered longer than necessary, holding me there. For a moment I felt as if I had stepped into something I didn't fully understand, yet couldn't step back from either. Her hand shifted. The backs of her fingers brushed mine this time, barely, but enough to send a pulse through me. She didn't apologize, didn't pull away. She just let the silence hang there, charged, like she was waiting to see what I'd do with it. "You shouldn't linger in doorways," she murmured at last, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "It's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" I asked, and I hated how unsteady it came out. Her gaze flickered down, then back up, measured, deliberate. She leaned closer, and I felt the warmth of her body against the cool air of the hall. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to answer, but instead she let the quiet stretch again, heavy and suggestive. Finally, she whispered, "Because if I let you in, you might never leave." The words seemed to hang between us, vibrating with something that was both warning and invitation. And just as I tried to read the meaning in her eyes, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, sharp, approaching. Her hand froze against the doorframe. My breath caught. She glanced toward the sound, then back at me, her expression unreadable. The door was still half open. The footsteps in the corridor faded, and only then did she exhale, slow, deliberate. She closed the door halfway, enough to shut out the hall, but not enough to shut me out. Her eyes flicked back to me, softer now. "You should go," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I didn't move. Maybe I should have. Maybe that would have been the sensible thing, to spare her whatever risk she was hinting at. But instead I leaned a fraction closer, resting my shoulder against the frame, as if my body had decided for me. She noticed. Her brow tightened, but she didn't step back. "I'm not good at this," I confessed quietly. A pause. "At what?" "At pretending I don't want to be here." The faintest breath escaped her, not quite a laugh, more like disbelief. She tilted her head, studying me the way you'd study a word you weren't sure belonged in a sentence. Then, almost reluctantly, she opened the door wider. The room was warm compared to the hallway, dimly lit by a single lamp near the sofa. Books stacked unevenly on the table, a sweater draped across the back of a chair. It didn't feel staged, it felt lived in. The kind of space someone retreated to, not entertained in. I stood near the doorway, unsure of the rules now. She set a glass on the counter, her movements unhurried, but I caught the way her hand lingered against the rim a moment too long, as though she was steadying herself. "You're young," she said finally, without turning around. "Not that young," I replied. "Old enough to know better. Young enough to think that matters." She turned then, leaning lightly against the counter, arms folded. Her blouse slipped slightly at the collar, revealing the gentle hollow of her throat. She didn't pull it back into place. I wanted to look away, but my eyes betrayed me. She noticed that too. "Tell me something," she said, eyes narrowing with the weight of the question. "Why here? Why me?" I hesitated. Words felt heavy. "Because you don't look through me," I said. "Most people do. You don't." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Her lips parted as if to respond, but no sound came. Instead, she crossed the space between us. Not quickly, not slowly, but with an inevitability that made my chest tighten. She stopped just short of me. Her hand lifted, brushing against my shoulder, the touch light as a passing thought. It stayed there, lingering longer than it should have, before she let it drop. "I've already lived through mistakes like this," she said softly. "That's what makes it different," I countered before I could stop myself. Her breath caught, and I felt it against my cheek, close, impossibly close. I thought she might step back then, retreat into the safety of her distance. Instead, she let the silence expand, so close I could feel the warmth of her skin, the faint tremble of restraint in her hand when it almost, reached for mine. I wanted to bridge the gap. God, I wanted to. But something in her expression, the flicker of fear disguised as composure, held me still. She finally moved, circling past me toward the sofa. Her fingers brushed the back of it as she sat down, legs crossing slowly, deliberately. The kind of gesture that wasn't careless, but measured. "Sit," she said, not looking at me. I did. The cushion dipped beside her, and for a moment, our knees nearly touched. She reached for a book on the table, but instead of opening it, she turned it in her hands absently. "People talk," she said, still not meeting my eyes. "Let them." Her head lifted then, and the look she gave me was half warning, half wonder. She held it for a long beat, then slowly placed the book aside. Her hand shifted again, this time brushing against mine where it rested on the sofa. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Her fingers lingered, light but certain, before curling back into her lap as if the moment had betrayed too much. The silence after that wasn't empty. It was full, crowded with the weight of everything neither of us had dared to say yet. And when she finally turned her face toward me, eyes steady and searching, the electricity in the air didn't fade. It deepened. The silence between us thickened until the faint buzz of her phone on the table cut through it. She didn't reach for it. The screen lit up briefly, a name I didn't recognize, then went dark again. Her hand hovered like she might grab it, but instead she leaned back, away from the table, closer to me. Too close. "You should answer," I murmured. Her eyes slid toward me, steady, unreadable. "No," I swallowed. The air felt heavy, charged with something we weren't naming. My knee brushed hers accidentally, and instead of pulling away, she let the contact linger. That small point of touch felt louder than the silence. "I don't think you realize." She started, then stopped. Her fingers fidgeted with the seam of her blouse. "This isn't something people would understand. I don't care what people think." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite disbelief. "That's because you're young. You can afford not to care." "I can't." Her words should have cooled the air, but they didn't. They only made me lean a fraction closer. I could see the faint shimmer of light on her lower lip, the slight tremor when she pressed it between her teeth. "You think I haven't thought about this?" she whispered. Her breath grazed my cheek as she said it, warm, unsteady. My pulse stuttered, and for a moment I thought, no, I knew, she wanted me to close the distance. I did, almost. Our foreheads nearly touched, her lashes low, lips parting just slightly. The space between us shrank until the air itself seemed to thrum. And then, the door clicked. We jolted apart as her neighbor's voice drifted through the crack in the hallway. "Hey, you in there?" A man's voice, casual, too close. Her spine stiffened. She glanced toward the door, then at me, panic flashing across her face before she smoothed it away. "1 second," she called out, her voice steady in a way her body wasn't. I shifted, standing too quickly, nearly knocking the book from the table. My chest was tight, breath uneven. She gave me a sharp look, not angry, but desperate, pleading for silence. The knock came again, lighter this time. "Just wanted to drop something off," the neighbor said. A pause. "I'll leave it here." We listened as footsteps faded. Only when the hallway was quiet again did she let out a breath, her hand pressed to her chest. "That's what I mean," she said finally, voice hushed but fierce. "This isn't simple." I sat back down slowly. "It doesn't have to be." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, almost accusing, then softened. She reached for her glass of water, fingers trembling enough to clink against the rim. She took a slow sip, then set it down, though her hand remained against the glass longer than it needed to. "You don't understand what it would cost," she murmured. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to catch her gaze. "Then help me understand." Her hand lifted, almost involuntarily, resting on my arm. The warmth of her palm seared through the thin fabric of my sleeve. She didn't pull away this time. We sat there like that, suspended, her touch anchoring me, my body aching to turn, to close that impossible inch between us. Her breath quickened, shallow, betraying her calm mask. She finally whispered, so low it was almost lost. "If you knew what I was risking, you wouldn't sit this close." I turned toward her slowly, letting my shoulder brush hers. Our faces were close enough now that I felt every exhale. Her hand tightened slightly on my arm. Neither of us moved away. Her hand still rested on my arm, light but steady, like she didn't trust herself to let go. I should have said something safe, something that would ease the strain between us. Instead, the words came out raw. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her breath caught. For the first time, she didn't mask her reaction. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and a flush rose along her throat. She let her hand fall away, but not before her fingers brushed slowly down the length of my sleeve, trailing heat with them. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "It's the truth." Her laugh was quiet, unsteady, without joy. "Truth doesn't always help." She turned slightly away, but I reached out, unable to stop myself, and touched her hand before it could retreat completely. Her skin was warm, her pulse quick beneath my fingertips. She didn't pull away. The lamp cast shadows across her face, softening the lines at her eyes, the curve of her cheek. I lifted my other hand slowly, brushing a strand of hair back from her forehead. She froze, not resisting, not yielding, simply suspended in the moment. "You don't know what you're asking for," she murmured, eyes closing as my fingers lingered briefly against her temple. "Then tell me," I said, my voice low, leaning closer. "Tell me why I should walk away." Her silence stretched. When she finally opened her eyes, they glistened with something fierce and fragile all at once. "Because I've built a life people trust me to hold together. Because you'd unravel it with one look." Her hand lifted, hesitated, then came to rest against my chest. "And I don't know if I want to stop you." The pressure of her palm through my shirt made my heartbeat stumble. I covered her hand with mine, pressing it closer, silently daring her to feel what she was doing to me. Her breath was uneven now, each exhale brushing against my lips as if we'd already crossed that final inch. I could see the faint tremor in her lashes, the way her jaw tightened, fighting something she'd already lost. "You're making this impossible," she whispered, almost accusing. "Or maybe it already was," I said. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, tired, dangerous, wanting. She leaned in then, not enough to close the space, but enough that her cheek grazed mine. Her hair tickled against my skin, and her breath warmed the edge of my ear. Do you have any idea what people would say? She asked, voice breaking between warning and surrender. Say what they want, I murmured back, tilting my head so the corner of my mouth brushed the edge of her jaw. Her hand clenched against my chest. She drew back a fraction, just far enough that our eyes locked again, and the air between us felt unbearably thin. This isn't who I am, she said softly, though her body betrayed her words, leaning toward me still. I traced my thumb along the back of her hand, slow, deliberate. Then maybe you've been hiding who you are. She inhaled sharply, her lips parting as if to answer, but the sound never came. Instead, the silence wrapped around us, taut, breaking. Her other hand lifted almost without permission, brushing against my jaw, holding it there, a gesture too intimate to take back. We sat there, bound in a stillness so charged it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. And then she whispered, barely audible, "If I let this happen, there's no undoing it." Our mouths hovered a breath apart. The doorbell rang. The doorbell's chime still vibrated through the air when she jerked back, her hands slipping from my jaw. She stood quickly, smoothing her blouse as though that could erase the electricity that had just passed between us. I stayed where I was, chest tight, watching as she crossed to the door. Her movements were careful, practiced, but I noticed a faint tremor in her fingers as she reached for the handle. Through the peephole she froze. Then, without opening it, she pressed her back to the door, shutting her eyes. "Who is it?" I whispered. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. My pulse kicked harder. The bell rang again, followed by a woman's voice. "It's me. Open up." Her eyes flew to mine, wide, almost panicked. She raised a finger to her lips. I didn't move. Couldn't. "Come on," the voice coaxed, lighter now. "I know you're home." She swallowed, then called out, her tone brisk, practiced. "I'm busy. Tomorrow." A pause. Then footsteps retreating. Silence returned, heavy as stone. She didn't look at me right away. When she finally did, her face was pale, her expression guarded. "Who was that?" I asked. Her voice was steady, too steady. "A friend." But her body betrayed her, the way she crossed her arms tightly, the way she avoided my eyes, the way her breath came just a little too fast. "Don't lie," I said quietly. Her lips pressed together. Then, with a sigh that seemed to drain her, she leaned back against the door. "It's complicated." I stood, crossing the space slowly. She didn't stop me, but her gaze tracked every step. When I was close enough, I could see the way her throat worked as she swallowed, the faint sheen of sweat at her temple. "She knows about us?" I asked. Her laugh was sharp, humorless. "There is no us." The word stung, but her eyes betrayed her again. They flickered down to my mouth before darting away. "She suspects," she admitted finally. "She's noticed the way you look at me. The way I—" Her voice faltered, and she pressed her lips together hard. "The way you what?" I pressed. Her silence stretched until I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a whisper so soft it felt stolen, she said, "The way I can't look away." The confession landed between us like a spark on dry wood. I stepped closer, until the space between us was nearly gone. She turned her head, but not fast enough to hide the flush in her cheeks. My hand lifted, almost of its own accord, brushing against her arm as I leaned in. "You're trembling," I said. Her body stiffened at the words, then softened with a shaky exhale. "Because this is dangerous," she whispered. "Or because you want it?" Her eyes snapped to mine, fierce, wounded, wanting. For a moment neither of us moved. Then she pushed past me suddenly, brushing my shoulder with hers. The contact was sharp, electric. I turned, watching as she paced toward the sofa, her arms wrapping around herself. She stopped, back to me, voice low and raw. "She would ruin me if she knew. She's not just a friend. She's someone who trusts me. Someone I can't betray." The air seemed to thin. The revelation pressed down like weight. "And me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What am I to you?" She turned then, slowly, eyes shimmering with something between defiance and surrender. She crossed the room with deliberate steps, stopping just inches away. Her hand lifted, hovering near my chest, not quite touching. "You're the mistake I can't stop wanting." The words hit me like fire. I caught her wrist gently, holding it there between us. Her pulse raced beneath my fingers. Neither of us spoke. The silence was its own language, her quick breaths, the heat radiating from her body, the way her eyes locked on mine like she was daring me to close the distance. Finally, she whispered, so close her lips nearly brushed my ear. "If I let you stay tonight, nothing will ever be the same." Her hand pressed flat against my chest. My grip tightened on her wrist. The choice hung there, trembling in the air between us. Her hand flattened against my chest, her pulse a frantic drum under my fingers. We stood locked there, suspended in the fragile space between decision and regret. "You don't understand," she whispered, though her voice cracked like it already knew I did. "I do," I said, leaning closer. "Maybe too well." Her breath hitched. The faint scent of her, warm, familiar sandalwood, tangled with the air between us. She was trembling, not from fear, but from restraint, from holding back something that had already slipped past words. "Tell me to leave," I murmured, my forehead nearly brushing hers. "Say it, and I will." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, pleading, but no sound came. Instead, her lips parted, and her breath brushed across my mouth like a secret she couldn't contain. I tilted my head, closing the gap until only a breath remained. The tension was unbearable. Her hand still pressed against me, my grip on her wrist tightening as if letting go would undo everything. "You'll ruin me," she said, the words breaking into the silence. "Then let me," I answered, raw, unsteady. Something shattered in her then. She leaned into me suddenly, her forehead against my cheek, her body pressing close enough that the air seemed to collapse around us. My arms circled her instinctively, pulling her in as though I'd been holding back that motion for weeks. Her hands clutched at me, not graceful, not composed, but desperate. She buried her face against my neck, her breath ragged, uneven. The weight of her surrender was almost too much to bear. "I can't," she whispered against my skin. "But I can't stop." Neither could I. I pulled back just enough to see her face, to watch the war still playing out in her eyes. For a heartbeat, we hovered there, every choice balanced on the edge of her trembling lips. And then she closed the distance. It wasn't polished or careful, it was messy, sudden, as if the dam had burst. Her mouth found mine with a force that stole my breath, and all the silence, all the hesitation, unraveled in an instant. I held her tighter, afraid she'd vanish if I let go. Her hands tangled in my shirt, clinging, pulling me closer still. The kiss deepened, urgent and aching, tasting of everything we had denied ourselves until this moment. When she finally broke away, she kept her forehead pressed against mine, her breathing uneven. Her eyes were damp, shining in the dim light. "This changes everything," she said softly. "I know. And you don't care?" I shook my head, my lips brushing hers as I spoke. "Not if it means losing this." Her fingers brushed my jaw, trembling, tender. She exhaled, long and shaky, as though something inside her had finally given up the fight. "Then you're staying?" she whispered. Not a question. Not a plea. A truth she had finally allowed herself to speak. I nodded once, and in that moment, everything between us was clear, not simple, not easy, but real. She leaned into me again, quieter now, her body melting against mine as though it had always belonged there. And for the first time, either of us pulled back. The room was quiet again, but it no longer felt fragile. She sat beside me on the sofa, her knees brushing mine, her hand still resting against my chest as though she wasn't ready to move it. I held it there, fingers laced lightly around hers, feeling the unsteady rhythm of her pulse. We didn't speak at first. Words felt too clumsy for what had just happened. Her head tipped forward, and I felt the weight of her forehead rest against my shoulder. A sigh slipped from her, soft and tired, but not unhappy. "I never thought I'd let this happen," she admitted at last, her voice low, almost swallowed by the quiet. Neither did I confessed. But I can't regret it. Her laugh was faint, dry, but warmer than before. You're too young to regret anything yet. I turned my head slightly, brushing my lips across her hair, breathing in the faint scent of sandalwood and something uniquely hers. Then let me prove you wrong. She leaned into me more fully, her hands slipping from my chest to settle in mine. Our fingers intertwined slowly, naturally, like it had been waiting to happen. The simplicity of that gesture, no urgency, no disguise, felt more intimate than anything else. I kept telling myself it wasn't possible, she said. That the years between us would make it foolish. That people would see and whisper. That I'd lose something important. She lifted her head then, looking at me with eyes that seemed to search for one last excuse. And now? I asked. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. Now I realize I've already lost too much by keeping myself apart. The words sat between us, fragile but true. I raised our joined hands, pressing a kiss against her knuckles. She didn't look away. Silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, a blanket instead of a weight. She shifted closer until her body rested against mine, her head tucked neatly beneath my chin. My arms slipped around her shoulders, holding her there. For a long time, we just breathed together. The sound of her steadying heartbeat against me, the rise and fall of her chest, the warmth of her skin against my side, it was enough. More than enough. When she finally spoke again, it was barely louder than a whisper. You might not leave after this, you know. I smiled, brushing a kiss against the crown of her head. Good. I don't want to. Her fingers tightened around mine, a subtle squeeze, like she was sealing the words into something real. And in that quiet moment, every doubt, the age, the risk, the what-ifs, seemed to fade into the background. What was left was simple, us here, together, without the distance we'd fought for so long. She lifted her head once more, her lips grazing my cheek, soft and lingering. Not rushed, not desperate, but steady. Certain. We stayed like that, close, tangled, unwilling to let go, until the world outside felt like nothing more than a faint hum beyond her door. For the first time, there was no pretending, no hesitation. Just her and me, finally on the same side of the choice. And in her quiet, unguarded smile, I saw the truth we both already knew. I wasn't leaving. Not tonight. Not ever.